Yay. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you so much for everyone turning up, especially those of you who are here in the middle of the night or very early in the morning. That is fantastic. I am really super pleased to welcome Dr. Peter Duchemin with us today. I know some of you are in Peter's tarot magic course with me, so you're very familiar with his work. Others of you are completely just like, who is this guy that they keep talking about? What's going on? So a little intro. Peter is an artist, a magician, an academic, and a tarot reader. He's got 25 years reading experience working specifically with Kabbalistic tarot and esoteric traditions of magic. He is a Canadian, so shout out to the Canadians, and currently living in Hong Kong. So he's here today to talk to us about the Venus calendar and living in tarot time. And I think this is probably a subject, just the title of that, Peter, is intriguing. This is like mind candy. And I think it's probably an approach that for most of the people that I know in this group are really experienced tarot readers, and with a deep interest in magic. So, but I also think what's great about what you're going to be presenting to us is it's coming at it from a perspective that is utterly unique. And so, and I think I personally am excited to introduce your approach to this group of people. So I'm going to unpin myself and turn it over to you, but maybe you can just start by telling us a little bit about what is the Venus calendar and what do you mean tarot time?
Okay. So as Elise correctly pointed out, this work is based off of a calendar that I designed that is, how do I say it? Just trying to find a place exactly where to start. So I offer a course that's a 32-week tarot intensive in which each week has a particular theme. And the way this course is timed essentially is that the orbit of Venus, and we're talking from a heliocentric perspective, if you can imagine the sun in the center of the solar system, and the Earth goes around the sun. We all know what the ecliptic is. The ecliptic is the plane of the Earth's orbit around the sun. Now, if you can be stepping outside of the solar system and looking down, you will see that the other planets do not orbit exactly on the plane of the ecliptic, which means sometimes they cross it, going upwards or northwards, as it were, and sometimes they cross it going southwards. So there's two nodes. These are similar to the nodes of the moon in geocentric astrology, but in heliocentric astrology or astronomy, all the planets have nodes. And so starting in 2003, I designed my first calendar, which was Mercury. And then in 2005, I launched a Mars calendar. And then in 2007, I launched a Venus calendar. And the Venus calendar is actually the simplest and easiest to follow because Venus has an orbital period. If you think of those nodes, using the North Node as its starting point, it has an orbital period of 224.7 days. So forget the 0.7 for now. Just concentrate on the fact that 224 is 32 times 7. So as a esotericist, I'm quite familiar with the tarot, with the Tree of Life, and with the 32 Paths of Wisdom, which you'll find in the Sefer Yetzirah, which is a formational text of the Kabbalistic tradition. But which which form a kind of an organizational principle for the Kabbalistic tarot. So most of you will be familiar at least a little bit with this diagram. So this is the Kabbalistic tree of life, and it essentially has 32 components. So to make a long story short, when I realized that I had a orbital period that was divisible by 7, and 7 times 32, I realized I had something quite special. I had already built a calendar for Mercury, which has 88 days. So another period of time that's divisible by a major tarot number, namely 22. But in this case, I had a very beautiful, I guess you could say, sync up with a calendar that we're all following anyways, which is the 7-day week. The 7-day week. We are all fundamentally familiar with the 7-day week. It is probably the most pervasive world rhythm that exists. So much so that when the French and the Russians tried to get rid of it during their respective revolutions, they weren't able to shake the folk populace out of the tendency to work in a 7-day beat. And what I discovered when I did the initial research to find the start date, because I had to go into the NASA database, I discovered rather synchronistically that the Venus crossed the North Node on a Friday, which, as most of you will know, is Vendredi and is sacred to Venus. So it just happened to be a blessed coincidence, I suppose you could say. But in any event, what that meant was a calendar that ran 32-week cycles and would change over every Friday. So when I started this I set up in 2005, but in 2019, I started an Instagram account where I followed this as a discipline, and I found it was so simple because it has such a simple rhythm that we already know, that basically all you had to do is know what tarot card this week is themed around, that it really began to get people interested. And so I started a course based on it. And it has a very beautiful quality of synchronizing everybody's collective experience of meditation and exploration of the tarot. That's basically it in a nutshell.
Yeah, that is it in a nutshell. We are what, week 22 now?
That's right.
And
That's right.
this has been my first experience of, say, playing with consciously, let's say consciously and on purpose, playing with a different temporality and just the feel of the different speed of a cycle. And I have to say, now we're coming to the end of this Venus year. We're in the home stretch, and it's a very peculiar feeling that end of the cycle approaching while feeling the end of our Earth year moving at a different rate. So yeah, I guess my question for you, Peter, and let me just say to everyone else, so this is very much an open session. So if you have questions, either put them in the chat if you don't want to speak out loud, or when there's a pause in a moment, just unmute yourself and jump in. But so, like, someone sent through a question yesterday, Peter, which is backstepping a little bit, but I think it's really important to give permission for this question. And the question was basically, Kabbalah and tarot, how does it go together and why?
Okay. All right. So the history of that is, of course, complex. We don't have any evidence that the tarot was a Kabbalistic, a deliberately Kabbalistic text until, I would say, and you can correct me if I get my dates a little off, but in the 18th century, there began to be explorations of the notion. There was the idea that the tarot is the book of Thoth, was sort of retrodated as those kinds of societies and those kinds of writers tended to do. And the notion that the Kabbalah could be married to the tarot came about around that time. And it hit, I think, its feverish pitch in the work of the Golden Dawn, who I know it was before that you had Eliphas Levi and Pappas. I can't speak to them that well. I can't say that I am that well read in that particular period of French occultism. But what I do know is that, at least for most modern modern tarot readers who do explore the Kabbalistic tarot, it is the tarot that was bequeathed to us, the fusion that was bequeathed to us by the Golden Dawn. And I am not a person who would say that this was necessarily something going way back to antiquity, but I think it's an interesting fusion of systems. The Golden Dawn were, of course, very syncretistic, and they were very interested, because they were coming out of the Victorian period. They were very interested in bringing multiple systems to communicate into a kind of a syncretistic whole. And whether that is a genuine tradition of its own, or whether it's a kind of a meta language or an interlanguage, I think if it's a bit of a magical interlanguage that they developed. But when the tarot and the Kabbalah come together, to my mind, it's a bit like the rhizome in the cell. It's these two systems, and they achieve a synthesis. They achieve a fusion where one supplies a certain benefit to the other. So I think having learned initially on the Thoth deck and then moved to exploring other decks, I use the RWS as my standard. I consider it quite stable, even though I essentially think that the tarot is something that is within us. It's not in the cards. It's a kind of an oral tradition that we access through the cards. So each one of us has their own unique hybrid tarot, whether that's a little Thoth, a little Marseille, a little RWS, a little Visconti. We all are sort of a different combination of it. We have our own proportions, if you will. But the Kabbalah, for some of us, becomes a way of using the tarot to achieve an exploration of the levels of consciousness. And for me, actually, I now am branching off more into more traditional Kabbalah. I find that the Jewish tradition of Kabbalah is quite rich and extraordinary, and deserves practice and consideration kind of in its own right. So I wouldn't say I collapse the systems, but there is a place where they meet in the tarot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense to me. And yeah, and just to reiterate what you said, it's like Kabbalah is a pre-existing system that was then applied to tarot, and this whole other esoteric system evolved in conjunction with the tarot. Yeah. And like speaking to that part about Kabbalah being this exploration of, I guess, really like the evolution of your personal consciousness. What I find with your work is that you bring this you yoke that with the different calendars, and what what this creates, I think, is a whole other multi-layered system which installs the tarot, I would say, in the heart of the practitioner. And I've heard you speak about tarot as a synesthetic experience. So my question then is, what would you have to say about that, like that personal that personal felt sense of interacting with the system, as well as time, as well as this beautiful collection of art?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll just say that the first time I ever did a path working, I didn't know what I was doing. And it was about 1999, and I was in a very kind of big slump. I was feeling disempowered. I was depressed. I didn't like where I was living. I was in second year university studying philosophy, and I picked up the the universe because I was reading the thought. I picked up the universe, and I just said to myself, "Okay, I'm in the universe now." And I sat with it and I thought about it, and then I left it. And then as weeks went by, I started to feel this card. I started to, I guess, filter my experiences through the lens of this card. I started to see things, and I started to feel this density, to the point where one day I realized, hold on, I've been in the universe for 3 weeks or a month. What if I move on to the Aeon, which is, of course, the Thoth equivalent of the Justice card? And so I did the same thing. I sat with the Aeon, as if I was stepping through a door, and it all came quite intuitively. And then things shifted for me, and I started to see things differently, and I started to feel this. The momentum that I built in the first case had started to sort of shift and change, and then I did this with the sun and the moon, and I started to move through it, and I had this experience that completely metamorphosized my perspective. And after that happened, I did it several more times. I started with the Thoth deck, and every time I did it, I learned something new. I began to become more and more intimate with the cards, as well as I began to see extraordinary synchronicities in my daily life. And one day, while walking the path of the Wheel of Fortune, I walked into a bookstore called the Singing Pebble in Ottawa, Ontario. And I walked into the Singing Pebble, and I saw a copy of the American Heliocentric Ephemeris for the 21st Century. And I bought that book, and it was an ephemeris, but it was an ephemeris with heliocentric positions of the planets. And I knew that because I'd taken astronomy courses. I'm a big fan of astronomy. And I knew that Mercury had 88 days in its orbit. And so I had in my head, oh, I could actually create a perpetual path working machine by just creating a calendar. I was familiar with the New Age Mayan calendar, so I knew that an alternate calendar could induce a different sense of what it is like to become. I've been reading the French philosopher Henri Bergson, who wrote a great deal about becoming and duration. So I was in the philosophy of it. And that just sort of percolated there, that book, this wheel of the heavens, which is, of course, the wheel, the wheel of life and death, the wheel of heavens, the wheel of time. And then I guess a year later, I moved to Newfoundland, and that year I just got it in my head. I'm gonna make this calendar. I'm gonna make this Mercury calendar, and I did. On December 19th, 2003, Mercury crossed its north node, and I set it into motion. And from there, I began to live in this tarot time perpetually. Sometimes I was lazier and not focused, and so I wasn't paying attention. But when I paid attention, it really came to life. And from there, obviously, I started to work with the other calendars. There are 8, and for all the planets. And that took me about 10 years to pull together. But it was really in 2019 when I sat down and I said, okay, I'm gonna implement the public working of the Venus count, the Forest of Life calendar. That was when it started to pick up the momentum of other people's interests, and since then it's just been pretty extraordinary. But that's what it's like. It's like living inside of the symbol. It's living inside of the stories of the tarot.
Yeah, so I think you may have answered this question, but there's a question in the chat that says, so the card that is picked that you are studying each week, is that part of the calendar and not just
Yes,
randomly selected? Yes.
it is no way random.
No way random.
The calendar.
I'll give you the second half of this question, then you can jump in.
Yeah.
Have you found events in the world reflecting the tarot card you were working with each week? And I think coming out of the week we've just had the answer to that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So last week was justice, and of course the great event. There were multiple events. For one thing, there was Truth and Reconciliation Day in Canada, which is bringing the voice of the Indigenous people to light and putting it out there because of this extraordinary injustice that compound series of extraordinary injustices that haunt Canada, and so that occurred during the week of justice. Also, the murder of the white stag in Liverpool, which is such an injustice, and so this, justice and injustice are in many ways two parts of the same contemplation. So that's an example of it. But I've seen extraordinary events both in my personal life and in the larger world. And I think part of the reason for this is, if I may quickly go over the structure of the 32 weeks. The 32 weeks are divided into 3 groups. So you have 10 weeks that follow the Sephiroth from Kether, Chokhmah, Bina, Chesed, Geburah, Tifereth, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malkuth. So the 10 weeks of what is sometimes called the path of the lightning bolt is the path of manifestation, basically from 1 dimension into 2, into 3, into 4, and then ultimately to 10, which is this kind of reprise of 1. So that's your first 10 weeks. And during those weeks, we study the minor arcana and we study the court cards. And we will do collective meditations as well as art. I didn't mention this, but maybe Elise did. This is really a tarot incubator. The main practice, you can do rituals, you can do meditations, but the main thing that drives this is making tarot decks. It's basically an ongoing art jam that's scheduled by Phoenix. And so if you were to play this game, you would in Kether week, you'd make a set of aces. In Bina week or Chokhmah week, you'd make 2s and kings. In Bina, you'd make 3s and queens, and so on. So you actually make your deck following this. But then it gets interesting. Then we move in week 11, we go to the world and we move backwards up the path. So the world, the judgment, the sun, the moon, and so on, all the way up to justice, which is right at the center. And we're making tarot cards, we're learning different practices, sometimes there will be a totally different magical system that we'll talk about during a week. So for example, we'll talk about the runes in the week of the hangman, because the hangman is Odin. We'll talk about, we haven't got there yet, but we'll talk about the Ohms in the week of the hermit, because the hermit is, I see him as a kind of a tree planting, druidic kind of a character. But by the time we have gotten all the way back through all 32 weeks to the top, we're back at the place that we're going to start again. So there's this cycle moving up and down the tree. This is like a wave in time. And the more people who are experiencing this, the more collectively this wave gathers a kind of, I want to call it a mimetic, and I'm talking the word mimesis. I'm not talking about memes. I'm talking about mimesis. Art imitates life, imitates art. A mimetic wave. And that's something of a feedback loop. So if you want to put a rational spin on it, you could see it as this semiotic amplifier of the tarot that just continues to spiral in larger and larger and larger kind of gyres. But it's more than a rationalist experience by far. It's I would say, there's a time when you take your sword and you sheath it and you just go into the experience of living in this rich, symbolic, temporal environment and allow it to
yeah
oscillate.
So there's one question that this is another one I think is really important to address. Is it possible to follow along in this work if one has no experience working with Kabbalah? Can I answer that? Because for many years I have been deeply adverse to Kabbalah, and like many teachers have tried to take me somewhere I refuse to go. But the way you've presented it, as a path that you walk through over this period of time, as well as including the creativity and the artwork and the scrying and the retrieving images from our subconscious, means that you have absolutely opened Kabbalah to me in a way that others have failed miserably to do. So thank you, Peter. So I think I hope that answers that. What do you think, Peter? Like, would you say it's?
I say yes, but there are I think I've observed there are prerequisites of, how do I say it? It's not the knowledge that you need to have, but what I have found is that magical practitioners of a certain level of maturity know how to follow through with a process. And one of the things that more mature practitioners learn is that during any process that we undertake, the mind will at some phase present you with every possible good reason to give up. That's one of the functions. That's actually what gives magic its torque, is that we encounter that voice of self-doubt, we stare it in the eye and we yoke it. And when we do that, we cross the boundary of the inner dialogue, and we enter into I will say, I'll simply cite the four principles: to know, to will, to dare, and to keep silent. We learn how to apply those to the act of following through with an experience. And I think that kind of maturity is pretty important, because what I've noticed is people who haven't encountered that kind of, I want to say, barrier of self-doubt will sometimes drop out pretty early. They'll be overwhelmed and they'll talk themselves out of it. And I think that, yeah, in that case, it's the only real barrier is the dialogue with your mind. So the best thing you can do if you are feeling overwhelmed is reach out to other people who are having this process. And you will not understand everything that's being said by everybody, especially if you're new to Kabbalah. But if you reach out and make allies of your fellows, then you will have a resource that will get you past the isolated barrier of self-doubt. But that's the only real thing that I've seen, is that people who are not as experienced in magic can talk themselves out of this.
Yeah. So you don't have to know Kabbalah, but you can't take the Kabbalah out of it. You have to see it through.
It grew on the Kabbalistic trellis like a grapevine. So it's sort of, it's a fundamental part of this practice.
There's another interesting question. Could you please say something about the relationship of the Venus calendar exploration and the seasons, in particular, like relationships to crops?
Okay. So I would say, because the Venus calendar is 224-day cycle, there doesn't appear to be, that I'm aware of, a direct correlation to crops. Now, that being said, because it is another planet, that being said, the behavior of bodies outside of the Earth do affect our crops. So we know that the 22-year solar sunspot cycle has an effect on agriculture. That's scientifically documented. So there are ebbs and flows in the abundance of production that are based on this 22-year solar sunspot cycle. The nearest, I mean, Venus starts to get very, very, very interesting when you look at how it meshes up with the Earth's orbit. So it has, there's this thing where every 8 Earth years, almost exactly, like with a differential of about 2 hours, Venus, the Sun, and the Earth essentially there's a conjunction cycle. So Venus is synodic cycle. Synodic cycle is just basically like watching Venus wax and wane. So morning star, evening star, morning star opposition, evening star conjunction, morning star opposition, evening star conjunction. It's 584 days. 13 times 584 is 8 times 365.25, which is what it means when you see these pictures of the pentagram around. Everyone here has seen pictures of Venus tracing a pentagram around the sun. What that is the fact that Venus and the Earth come conjunct at one point in the sky, and then they go through this whole 584-day period, and then they become conjunct again, exactly 1/5 around the zodiac, and then again another 1/5 around the zodiac. And so this happens 5 times, evenly spaced at 5 points around the zodiac. So there is this 5-petaled flower or 5-pointed star traced out by the Venus Sun conjunction. So what am I getting at there? If there is a direct influence on seasonal cycles of Venus and the Earth, it won't be on the scale of 1 year, it'll be on the scale of 8 years. And it would have to be quite subtle. But I imagine that's where you would be able to start to, you'd want to look at 8-year cycles, not 1-year cycles, because that's when the mesh happens.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and you've been through the Venus year a number of times now. Is it, and in comparison to the other calendars that you're also working with, do you find that when you attune to the Venus calendar, there is more of a personal journey through Venusian qualities that you know, like giving, receiving, matters of the heart, pleasure, things like that?
I think that when I initially kind of conceived of this, I thought of the first 3 were Mars, Venus, and Mercury, and I thought of them as, for the longest time, they were the 3 principal calendars. And I thought of Mercury as the cockpit, and Mars as the hull, and Venus as the life support system. And because Venus is the most livable, it's the most human, it's the simplest to understand. It's easy to follow the Venus calendar because we're following that rhythm of 7 days anyways. The Mars calendar has uneven, the Mercury calendar is 11-day periods. It gets weird and to some degree isolating. And one thing I found was that on its own, following the Mercury count was kind of insane making, as you would imagine. They say, the substance Mercury is responsible for some people going kind of nutty. And so, but on its own, that following that rhythm that was not like anything else was a bit crazy making. And similarly with Mars, but Venus, because it has this rhythm that we all commonly follow, it had this way of bringing it all back into a social space. It somehow brought me into common sociality with other people. So I guess Venetian qualities for me are green and organic and forest-like. I think of Netzach as a very organic sphere. If you follow the Kabbalah, Netzach is Venus, and I think of the Empress as being the natural world, the Garden of Eden, the forest of life. And when I realized that basically everybody, it's funny to talk about a tree of life, right? That we're all studying the tree of life, like there's this just one tree. But no, there's a million. Every person who in any tradition who studies the tree of life has in a way had their own private tree of life. So what I realized is what this is this kind of tree of life planting schema. I was influenced by the story, The Man Who Planted Trees by Jean Giono, a great deal. And this idea of planting forests became a major part of, I guess, my vision of spirituality. So the Venusian qualities, yeah, they're love, they're the natural world, they're the organic. And yeah, it's absolutely that.
Yeah.
Fresh air, and it's the lungs of the earth.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking as someone who the first turn through the Venus calendar, like before we got stuck into this, my working days tend to be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and which is slightly out of sync with things like getting a kid to school and all in having a weekend of relaxation. But I realized quite early on, with Friday being the first day of the week, of the Venus week, that it's like, okay, like if I see the weekend as the beginning of the week, then I won't be depleted. I'll have more energy. And so now I maybe about 4 weeks in, I started consciously taking Wednesday and Thursday as my weekend, and really aligning myself with that Friday being the first part of the week. And the further we've gone through the cycle, the more that's really embedded in, just as most of us are accustomed to feeling Monday, like, oh God, it's Monday. Now it's, oh God, it's Friday, but let's go.
It ends on a Thursday. Thursday is a very nice note to close on, actually, because it's it's expansive in its nature. I do want to say one quick thing about the fact that it starts on a Friday. Actually, it didn't have to start on a Friday. The Venus calendar there's 224.7 days, which means that extra 0.7 adds up over time. So if following the 224-day or 32-week period, it starts to slip from the North Node, which means every 10 years, you have to add another 7-day week, which means that each one of the Venus years actually has the character of one of these spheres. So we're actually now in week 4, and so you'd have a cycle of 10 years and then an extra 7-day week to recalibrate it, and then a cycle of 10 years and an extra 7 days to recalibrate it. We're actually in the third of these big cycles since I started it. But the point is that I could have picked any year to look at. I wasn't thinking about it at the time. I came up with a concept, and I looked in the ephemeris and I said, okay, the next time Venus crosses the North Node, I'm going to start this calendar. And that could have been any day of the week. But it just happened to fall on a Friday, which means that now for perpetuity, because this thing recalibrates itself, for perpetuity, it's key to Friday. And that was not, that was a thing that just came about.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. You've made my working weekends much easier.
Friday is Venus Day, so I mean, it couldn't be more appropriate.
Yeah. So just to kind of pull this conversation back into tarot, then obviously, tarot is a sequential art, and this is really what attracted me to your work, because you bring that concept of time, of the sequence, of the storytelling tradition, navigating through journeys into it. So how do you think this deepens your understanding as a tarot reader, in terms of like connecting with the sitter?
Okay. When I sit with someone, I see 3 key streams like a three streams of wisdom coming to bear on a. Oh, hold on. I have to just. My light is going to go out behind me. Boop. And I have to plug in my computer. Hold on. Sorry about that. Okay, a reading has three key elements. And those elements, I just don't want to lose the, okay, I think I'm good now. I think I'm charging. Those three elements are the reader, the questioner, and the author of the deck, or the voice of the deck. And I would say, I see those as the fool, the magician, and the high priestess, following this schema, because those are the paths that connect to Kevin. But when I sit with someone, I'm not thinking, and I pull a spread out, I don't think to myself, okay, let's look at all the meanings of the cards and tell them something is going to happen that is a synthesis of the meanings of the cards that I see. What I try to do is I try to understand what their line of wisdom is, what my line of wisdom is, and then we basically have a conversation about art. And we look at the cards, we talk about things that we know in common. I watch their body language and I tell them that. I say, I'm reading the more you tell me, the more I can help you. Because the point isn't to predict the future. The point is to shape a path through time that has the most empowering, abundant, and shall we say, fitting resonance to it, right? And that's a cooperative art. I cooperate with. I don't see this as predicting the future. I see this as crafting a kind of a path through time with somebody as a collaboration, and I tell them that. But where this tarot time comes into it is I live inside of the tarot all the time. I eat, breathe, think, dream tarot related contemplations. And so what it allows me to do is it's constantly enriching my connection to these stories, not to the cards. The cards are just cues to point me to the story. I'm constantly deepening the story. And as I live the stories more intensely, my empathy and understanding and intuition of the client's needs increases, and my repertoire of good stories increases, because I'm chasing after, I may be reading something about the emperor and go and read some poem that works with the emperor, and then one day I'm sitting in a session with somebody and I remember a line from that poem and it's exactly what I need to say. It's exactly. So it's a way of living inside the tarot, so that when you read for someone, it's not mechanistic. It's this experience.
I love that, because most of us here are in my tarot group, Coffee and Cards, and we've been meeting almost every day to practice reading tarot, and which is phenomenal because we've gotten exposure to so many different styles of reading and so many different lines of inquiry as well, from predictive to just like what do I do next? I'm lost. And what I've found is I am always in awe of the people who can pull out really specific information from 3 major arcana cards and like on a health issue and say, oh, okay, you have inflammation of the gut due to this and this, or something like that. And that's like mind-blowing, but is it correct? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And if it's correct, does that information actually open a path for the person who's receiving it? And for me personally, the kinds of readings that I love to give are the explorations and these mutual collaborations. And as you say, telling stories, talking about art. I think sometimes,
Yeah.
yeah, the less detail you give, sometimes the more impact it can have, because it touches that mythic place in people's consciousness.
Yeah. I mean, you can find, I mean, most people, I think, when they come to a reading are experiencing some kind of a logjam, meaning some kind of a bottlenecking of different contending intentions or desires or worries that are, in my experience, at any rate, halting them from experiencing something they want to experience. And a
Yeah.
conversation is this kind of, especially a conversation laden with stories and parables and imagery and metaphor. Metaphor is the key, because that conversation will reveal uh, the paralysis. I mean, it's not always a case of paralysis, but usually someone comes to a reader when they want to resolve some kind of a conundrum.
Yeah.
And that conundrum is almost, I mean, I don't diagnose medical
Yeah.
illnesses for people. I'd be terrified to be wrong about something of that level of stakes, right? I just say, go check out, go to the doctor. But I like to help people unravel their bottlenecks by applying carefully crafted metaphors.
Yeah.
And I find nothing sets empowerment into motion quite like the metaphor that, that moves that one vital piece. And you can sometimes
Yeah.
see that, you can see the vital piece that needs to be affirmed.
Yeah.
And then affirm it, and then the person
Would you say
just,
that, do you find that people get stuck in their metaphors, and they need the permission and the possibility to see a new story and a new metaphor?
yeah, people get stuck in their metaphors, or even not even metaphors, in their sort of auto hypnotic,
Yeah.
and we all do, right? I mean, including myself. I was saying earlier to my friend, the magic isn't a lifestyle; it's a lifeboat. It's a repertoire of approaches for, and most of them are metaphorical, but it's for salvaging different kinds of situation. And so, yeah, so I would say that is, I mean, that's that to my mind, that's what the medicine of the tarot
Yeah.
is appropriate metaphor.
Which kind of brings me to, like, your definition of magic. Can you just say it for us?
I added a new word to it recently, but it is, I'm always evolving it. The magic is the pressure of art brought to bear on time.
Yeah.
But I recently added the word orthogonally.
Because there weren't enough syllables, basically.
Yeah, no, what can I say? Yeah, magic is the pressure of art brought to bear on time, but from the side.
Yeah. Yeah. I personally find this your definition of magic was personally eye-opening for me. Just that, that allowance of art to exist with the logic and the science of magic, as well as the mystery. I think it's a real strength in what you're presenting to people. And what can you say something? A lot of your teaching in the class revolves around scrying and getting down on paper, mark making.
Yeah.
What would you say that you're basically helping people retrieve their own personal imaginal magical language?
Yeah, I'm helping people learn how to map the deep parts of their being, which I believe open up into a deep being that we all share.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I help people, because when you don't have to be a great artist, but if I say, all right, here's 10 different versions of the Fool, and we've looked at them all, and now we're going to breathe 4 or 5 minutes and focus on a circle, and And now I want you to imagine you are stepping into the path of the Fool and have an experience. And once you've had that vision, whatever it is, come back out and put a mark on that piece of paper. And if you're a great artist, you'll make a funky fool. But if you never made a, you've never drawn a tarot card or anything before, you'll make a mark on that paper, and it might be like a stick man or something like that. But you know what? When you look at that mark, you will remember the vision. And that's the point. It's a map. It's not a tracing that we're trying to make. It's not a realistic, it is simply an indicator that will allow us to recover the vision. And the act of making that mark builds this link so that you look at that, and my stuff is super iconic. You know, it's not very, it doesn't look like anything. It looks like squiggles. But I look at the squiggles and I say, oh, I remember that. That was, you know, a bird, you know, carrying a bird cage flying across the sky, or some kind of weird thing I might have seen. So
I've led people in our group. We've done kind of creativity exercises with the tarot from time to time, and I always get you know, people have such loud inner critics around their artistic or creative abilities. I always get people who say, oh, I'm not creative, I can't do that. And I was like, you're a tarot reader. There's no way in hell that you're not creative. Come on. You're dealing in creativity here. Gemma said something I just want to share with the group and with you, because you probably can't catch the chat. But so she says, this is really interesting. It's like meeting the tarot reader. We go to the crossroads, to the meeting of Hermes, the storyteller. And in that place of change and exchange, we step into the meeting point where the stories cross. So we have the choice which ones to let go, which to move into, and see new paths open up before us.
It's the nexus. Yeah. And actually, I want to say something to that, which is one of the key features of the way I treat the major arcana is I use the RWS, Rider-Waite-Smith, and I fold it over. And I pair up the first and the last and the second last and so on. So there's 11 pairs of cards, and they all total, the trump numbers always total 21. So the Fool and the World is 21. The Magician, the Judgment is 21. And the reason, the way you know something is a pair is because its opposite makes it total 21. The Hermit and the Hangman is 21. And why is that significant? Because it tells a fundamental truth about the tarot, which is the tarot is always the story of the Fool and the World. In every single case, it's just a different shade of the story of the openness, you know, of mind and an environment that mind encounters. So it's very Spinozistic, you know, to talk philosophy. It's you know, thought and extension, and all the combinations that thought and extension can undergo. And when you say the crossroads, and from that crossroads, many adventures are possible. Well, that's the crossroads, because the world is the crossroads. It's Tau in the Kabbalah, right? The letter Tau, which means cross, and it's this nexus, and we're all basically here now. We're in the middle of now here. You know, at any given time, we're always in the middle of now here. And that's the place from which the tarot sprouts. So
Oh, thank you so much. We've got about 5 minutes left, Peter, and I want to make sure that everyone knows when the next cycle of the Meta Magic Tarot Venus calendar begins.
So it will start on Friday, December 17th, and it's the 5th year of this current cycle. It will have a 32-week course with 3 sections, a 10-day, an 11-day, and 11-day section. If you're interested, I might as well just say the cost of it. It's $250 American per section, and yeah, if you're interested, just write me or write Elise and get a hold of me and put your name down.
Just going to say, if you want to, anyone on the call today, you can send me your email address by a private message in the chat, and I'll make sure that Peter gets hold of it. And you're opening up pre-bookings, is that right, Peter?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So we can, yeah, if you know that you want to get involved, I'm going to pick which days of the week. Right now we do it on my Saturday night, but depending on the level of interest, I'm going to try to make sure that we have, probably several classes, enough for people in different parts of the world. So the day of the week has not been determined yet. So there may be a couple options, but it'll start on that.
Yeah.
And if you're interested,
yeah, I don't think there's anyone in this room who isn't interested at this point. Just saying. There was one last quick question in the chat, which is, what does he have planned for the extra days at the end of the 10-year cycle? Are we going to have like a festival? Are we going to have like I don't know, Venusberry big?
Oh yeah. So at this point in time, the Venus calendar is called the Forest of Life, but the overall system is called the Ibis System Orrery. It's a polycylindrical magical practice. And so at the end of the Venus calendar cycle, which will be 2025, so we got some time. So that extra week, there'll be a festival. I don't know where, but I'll probably throw a large event. I'm thinking probably Newfoundland, because that's where this was all born. This was all born in St. John's, Newfoundland. But who knows where it'll be? Maybe it'll be Hong Kong, because that's where I live. There'll be some kind of event. And also, I am looking, if people decide that this is something they really want to learn and have it in mind that they would actually like to offer these kinds of courses, it's a bit, it's something that would take a lot of commitment to learn it. I think of it as a bit like a kung fu, right? It's not something that you learn in a year or 2 years. It's something you might take more time to learn. But what I hope to do come next cycle is, if there are people who have really seriously engaged with this to the point where they have enough of the skill set to deliver this class independently, I hope to train and appoint some people by that date. So 2025. Maybe there'll be some other people who are their own independent Forest of Life mother trees.
I'm conscious that Aoife has unmuted herself and is kind of like jumping around as if she wants to say something. Aoife, what you got?
No, it's all true. It's all good. I didn't mean to do that. I was just excited. I was just wondering, like, how many times can we do this? Let's do it again. Even now, as you're talking, I'm making art. Like, I had to paint. Just now, I actually couldn't sit still. So I have to say, I don't know. Maybe I bought the sketchbook by accident when we began, and the artwork started really primitive and kind of awful. And then once we got into the major arcana, this kind of art came through that was like, big and bold. And it started off as tiny little squiggles of a really tired person at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning, making absolute nonsense. But the evolution, then the explosion of creativity. And I went in as a planetary magician going, oh, Venus, I want beauty and harmony and lovely men to walk into my life. And it's like, oh no, this is much bigger than that. So kind of kicks your ass, but in the proper magical initiatory way.
Not that you don't have a lovely man in your life at 9 a.m. every Saturday morning.
Well, yes. A lovely bearded man with recreational mathematics and a vocabulary that blows my mind. I have to say, like, it's really fun to not understand half of what's being said, because some part of me really, really does understand, and the rest of me's just been taken along on a wonderful journey of stories and images, and I just go with it. I think being really tired helps as well. You just kind of go, receive. So it's all true. It's all true. I'm having a wonderful time. I'm coming again.
I'm coming again too, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Last question. When is there a book? We need your books too. That's from Gemma. And
It's coming.
Heather, I feel like that Heather has a question which I feel like it's a bit bigger than the time we have allotted. So maybe she can message you or put it in the event chat as well.
I'll just say the cycle is 8 years. I don't. There's not a 75-year cycle.
She did some math somewhere way up in the chat that resulted in 75.
I will have to talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. And the book is coming.
Our bigger ones. The book is coming.
Cool.
Book is coming. I have a little a task I'm currently involved in, which involves a little man who was born in the Venus calendar.
Yeah.
So,
which
but
was
when,
the biggest alignment with the path of a particular card ever.
yeah, it was the world. He was born during the world.
Yeah.
You know, so it was yeah, it's yeah. But anyway, so that's kind of my center of focus. But that book is coming. So how about I just put it out there? I'll say within a year.
Cool. It's done.
Yeah. All right. Make it so.
And also, everyone, you can follow Peter at on Instagram at Tarot Philosopher, and there's like a gazillion other accounts. I can never. Every time I get a new like, I'm like, is that Peter's alter ego? I'm not really sure. And Peter has a wonderful YouTube channel where there's a video of basically every week of the course on YouTube. There's a wealth of information there, as well as a Patreon. You should support his work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, if anyone wants more information, just drop your email in the chat. Peter, any last thoughts?
No, just thank you all for coming with your interest and your energy, and I hope to work with many of you and to weave time together and create great stories and hear great stories, because you know it's not at the end of the day, it's a calendars interface the cosmos, the psyche, and the socius. And so it's a very social practice, calendar magic. It's boring alone. And the fact that so many experts have decided to join me in walking this means that I don't actually have to be the only expert. And the stories come together in a kind of a round table, and the expertise comes from all these different directions, and it braids together. And I just want to see more streams of time braiding themselves together into this adventure. So yeah, more art and more tarot decks. Thousands of tarot decks.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if you can see the chat, Peter, but everyone are sending in their thanks and their support. And also from me, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an absolutely fascinating and deep chat. And also thank you so much for your teaching. It continues to be, as you say, it's an incubator of creativity, but for me, it's also just profoundly transformative as well. So
thank you so much. Thank you, Elise, and thank you, everybody.
Okay, so that's it, everyone.
Thank you. Yay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was amazing. Loved it.
Thank you.
So I'm just giving everybody a chance to write their